Yeah, so I thought we'd talk about Red Rising by Pierce Brown, which you should be able to see around here, which I will be upfront about. I really didn't enjoy much. 2 stars, if that. And for such a beloved series on YouTube, I was just surprised by how much this was just a total flop for me. Like, I think it's something to do with the structure. So we open getting to know Darrow and the world he inhabits on Mars, mining for a resource called helium-3, which they use for terraforming. And it's a sort of a typical kind of dystopian, oppressive setup where there's an underclass. In this case, it's sort of a color caste system, so they're called Reds. He actually has red hair, as does his wife, Io. Is that something to do with why they're called Reds? I don't know. That's never really elaborated much. So Darrow goes on, he meets the resistance movement by chance and starts the revolution and plays a very key role in it, trying to change the system from the inside. You know what it's almost like? It's almost like one of those sort of parodies of revolutions. Like if anyone's ever seen Bananas by Woody Allen, that's an early Woody Allen film which is hilarious. And it's when Woody Allen's character is just a normal New Yorker, but he ends up leading a revolution in a banana republic. And it's almost like that, this sort of setup where, an unassuming sort of character without much personality, actually, it has to be said, ends up leading this revolution and playing such a key role in it. And then we have Darrow's wife, Io, and they're only 17, 16, 17 at the time, but she plays a very pivotal role getting fridged. If you don't already know what getting fridged means, it goes back to, I think, an issue of the Green Lantern, actually, the comic book character from DC, where the Green Lantern was motivated to take on the bad guy when his wife was found horribly dismembered in the fridge, literally. And that's become this sort of pop culture trope where a male protagonist is motivated by the plot convenient killing of his usually female partner. And, it's hardly a very progressive trope to have, but, here we are talking about it. So whether you think of it as sort of fridging or martyrdom, I found that opening section still probably the most interesting part of the whole book, because what comes next is this kind of Battle Royale, Hunger Games style kind of rip-off thing. Sort of action focused, but just repetitive, and Pierce Brown's prose is just totally, utterly unremarkable. There's nothing really in it. Even to call it workmanlike would be probably giving it more credit than it deserves. Probably the thing I struggle with the most is that it tries to establish this color-based caste system with reds at the bottom, so the underclass, and golds at the very top, so the leaders. And, all through there's a number of colors as well, who all have different roles in society. And the reds are the only ones that are totally kept in the dark about what their whole life purpose is, which is mining helium-3. They think that they're preparing for a great migration from Earth and they're playing a very pivotal role. But in reality, they're just, they're the underclass. They're doing it and they have no idea why. And that's the life they lead. But the problem with having this sort of dystopian, oppressive, totalitarian society and this sort of caste system is that so many other writers have done it so much better in the past. It's sad to say, but there's nothing particularly original or interesting about Pierce Brown's society that he sets up here. Not that we get much, we get a bit more in book 2, but even then, I can't help thinking of books like the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, if any of you have read that. So it's another trilogy which was written at a comparable time, I think, maybe a little bit earlier. And N.K. Jemisin just, her society, which is based on, oppression. And N.K. Jemisin's world is one where you have an underclass of Orogenies who are defined by the color of their skin, their appearance, so they're othered in that sense, but they also have great power. And it's a little bit like Avatar, The Last Airbender or something, they can sort of move the earth to varying degrees and control the elements. And they have so much power that they're utterly feared, and that's why they're pushed down to be this sort of underclass. And that's a very fascinating, that's a very unique kind of angle. And Jemison really parallels that with, real world instances of oppression. But with Pierce Brown, there's nothing like that. It's just a plot convenience sort of a thing, which I think was a real shame, because you can do interesting things with this sort of narrative, but he certainly doesn't. And another thing that Jemison explores really deeply and meaningfully, I think, is the internalization of your own oppression. And that's the sort of thing that would really elevate Red Rising, but Brown just doesn't seem to think of these things. And that, it's a real missed opportunity. Though all that said, he does touch on these sorts of themes in Golden Sun as a bit of an afterthought at the end, where it's a scene where he talks to his mother, this is in Golden Sun, and she sees what he's become, and they have this very meaningful talk, but it's sort of an epilogue, but in her opinion, even if the Reds did eventually find out the truth about the role they play in the society, being this underclass of miners, they wouldn't want to necessarily leave their life, because it's all they've ever known for 700 years. And so there's a little hint there, and I am hoping Brown will pick that up more in the sequel and the final book of the trilogy, which is Morning Star. Another thing I found a bit strange was, because Eo's fridged, she's martyred in the very opening, we never really get to know her character, and it often feels like Darrow doesn't really understand her either. When Darrow thinks of Eo, it's only ever in the context of, oh, he's having feelings of attraction for Mustang, and oh no, I can't do that, so here's my self-imposed chastity belt of deceased wife Eo, which has struck me as a little bit strange. It's a pretty convenient plot point. It creates the tension of, he does have feelings for Mustang and this other woman that he meets in book 1 in Red Rising, but he feels he can't act on them, So it does create the tension in the narrative, but it's a very artificial way to do it. And it's like Darrow, Darrow, like us, never really knew Eo. We know she was, she had red hair, flowing red hair, she was a fine dancer, and she inspired the revolution. There's images of her that have, gone viral, but beyond that, we never really get a glimpse into much of their life beforehand. And it's sort of wasted potential. Like, what would Red Rising have been like if Eo had lived to, and we got a sense of their relationship more if she does die, that's fine, perhaps, but as it happened, there was no emotional attachment. Yeah, so as many other booktubers have already said, this is very much got a sort of a first book kind of syndrome, where it spends a lot of time setting things up, but I think it sort of fails in that as well, because then it gets distracted and waylaid in this sort of Hunger Games, Battle Royale style narrative, which just drags on. Ultimately, it's a rough first book in the series. The second one's definitely better, and I'm looking forward to reading the third. Keep an eye out for my review of Golden Sun, which should be out soon. And please, if you're enjoying the video, like and subscribe, and I hope we can keep having more conversations just like this. Till next time, see ya.